First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta. We're going to start by lighting the candle. This morning, all of our songs are going to be in the new songbook, which is a notebook style. They have different color covers, but you should all have one. Today, we are blessed with the presence of Craig Refuse as our musician. Our first song is Both Sides Now. And in the new book, everything is alphabetical. So I don't Welcome to the First Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta. We are a philosophically based spiritual community based on existentialist and feminist principles and dedicated to human liberation. We make our spiritual home in the old stone church, which was hand-built by the African-American Antioch East Baptist Church. We acknowledge that racial hostility drove these African-Americans from the area, and we honor them with the powerful history of this place. This building is over 100 years old. We also acknowledge that in the 1800s, the Muscogee Creek people were driven from this land, and we support justice for all indigenous people. Do we have any newcomers who are here for the first or second time or haven't been here for a while? If you raise your hand, I can acknowledge you.
This is the third time.
Your third time, yes. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm James Schneider.
Welcome, James. Good to see you again. If anyone here is new or would like more information about our congregation, we have a connection card that is on the bulletin. You can fill it out and put it into the place. And if you're interested in any particular guild, someone from that guild will contact you. So, anyone else want to introduce themselves? Hello, Barbara.
Hey everybody. Hey. So glad to be back amongst the love. I'm halfway through my chemotherapy treatments. I am taking my wife back with me to Canada. I'm going to sit because I know you can hear my voice. A little bit of news. My younger sister, Kathie, that we've all been praying for, succumbed to side effects and passed away. It has been decided, we had the mass and the cremation, we've decided to inter her remains as per her wish with my mom and dad. And my older sister, who shared the same birthday as her, has chosen March the 16th, their birthday, to have the memorial interment. So Lynn will be able to be there with us for that. And I am grateful for all the love, the healing prayers, the notes through Facebook, because I do feel it. So I just wanted to thank everybody, and I'm glad to be back home among First E.
Anyone have a birthday or a celebration that they would like to be sung to?
For some reason,
Sure.
Hey, Andy, can you check on this mic?
the microphone's not working.
It's not working. Okay.
Yesterday was my 61st.
Can you hear me now? Yes,
Yeah.
it's working. Okay. Yes, we have a lot of mics around here today. So this is the beginning of Women's History Month. And so I'm going to read a couple quotes by women. I wish I could do her voice because this is from Congresswoman Barbara Jordan. And remember, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And remember, the world is not a playground, but a schoolroom. Life is not a holiday, but an education. One eternal lesson for us all to teach us how better we should love. We're going to have another congregational song, also in the new book, What's Going On? I'd like to mention that this new book, full of new songs, was created by a committee called the So Bad Committee. And I know Jean and Andy were on that committee. Anybody else, Jean?
Robert.
I know Robert, yeah.
Mary Howard.
Carol Harder, Mary Howard.
Stewart.
Yes, okay. So let's thank all the people that worked hard on this. I know it was not just a matter of gathering a bunch of songs, but often they had to look into copyrights and I'm not sure what all. Jean could tell you at great length, I'm sure, what all they went through, but it was a lot. It was a lot. And we certainly appreciate all the hard work they did and giving us some new songs to sing. If anyone has any community announcements, you can bring them up to me now or at any point in the service, and I will read them after the speaker. So right now, we are going to have a few words from our fellowship minister, Marcia Mishner.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
Good morning, everybody. Beautiful day. Sun is out. The flowers are blooming. The trees are blooming. The pollen is blooming. The traffic is blooming. But it is a beautiful day. Oh, and they're starting to rebuild the Krispy Kreme on I mean, what more can we ask? Right? No, it's great to have you here, and it is a beautiful day, and I'm grateful that you decided to come and spend your morning here. But I hope that you will be able to go out and really enjoy the nature that we have. I mean, we're very fortunate to live in a place like Atlanta, where it is so beautiful. But remember too that all of this is hanging on a thread because of the global warming and things that are happening throughout the world that are increasing the pollutants in a way that is destroying our environment. So please, in whatever way that you're able to do, please take. Even if it's just picking up some trash on your walk, or writing to your Congress people to encourage them to vote for environmentally positive legislation, so that we can continue, the generations beyond us, can continue to enjoy this incredible environment, that we have been so fortunate to have. So. Carpe diem.
Thank you, Marcia. So we are going to have 5 minutes of silence. You can meditate, pray, however you'd like to use this time, and I will let you know when time is up. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker. speaker for the day, Kathie Nobriga. She is a founding member of Alternate Roots, a service organization for community-based art in the South. She served as Roots' executive director and planning development director for 10 years. She has a background in theater, directing and managing community theaters. Now she's a consultant, specializing in strategic planning, building organizational capacity, designing staff board retreats, and guiding creative conflict engagement. She trained as a mediator at the Atlanta Justice Center and has served 2 terms as council member and 1 as mayor of the city of Pine Lake, where she lives with her wife, Alice Teeter, poet and bon vivant. Kathie's talk is entitled, "You Want Us to Do What?" Organizations and Conflict. Please welcome Kathie Nobriga.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back. I wanted to take a moment to remember Robert, because this is the first time I've been here without his invitation and presence. And I know you miss him deeply, as do I. So let's just take a breath in his honor with gratitude and love. You want us to do what? An introduction to organizational conflict. So, still inviting me here today to, quote, share my experience working in nonprofits and how to effectively and sensitively steer an organization when people have contrasting opinions, different outlooks, and even conflicts. Now, just to be clear, Stella was not talking about conflicts at the E-Church, just in general. So in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you for some examples of organizational conflict that we can use as our case studies this morning. So I'll just put that on your back burner. So I thought it might be good to outline my experience. We did that briefly, but I have had a dozen years running community theaters that depended on volunteers agreeing on their goals and how to get there. And then another dozen years trying to lead a diverse and sometimes cantankerous little city about community priorities. And then almost a decade leading a member-led, multi-ethnic, 14-state coalition of artists and culture workers, also diverse and at times cantankerous. I'm looking at you, Pat. And in each case, the contrasting opinions, different outlooks, and even conflicts were rampant. And my success as a consultant and that of the organization depended on being able to navigate those opinions, outlooks, and conflicts. Now, there are plenty of schools of thought devoted to this. There's books, there's articles, there's workshops, there's even master's degrees devoted to this topic. And one of my favorites is a book called Difficult Conversations. I was going to bring it with me, but I apparently loaned it to someone and failed to write down the Lindee. But it's readily available. It's from the Harvard Negotiation Project, and you may know it from their book, Getting to Yes. And their theory is that each conflict, there are 3 different conversations going on in the same time. The first conversation is what happened. This includes tips for navigating this conversation is to explore each other's stories, to separate impact and intent, and to abandon blame, and instead map a contribution system, sort of recognizing that we all have a place to play. We have all had a role to play in setting up a conflict. So the what happened is the first conversation. The second conversation is the feelings conversation, which really brooks no discussion. You feel what you feel, and you should have those feelings, or they will have you. So the feelings conversation. The third conversation is the identity conversation. Where do you see yourself in this conflict? What is your role or position? What's at stake for you? So I mentioned those three just to share one of my favorites. And this book and the workshops and the webinars and all those things are very accessible to everybody. So instead I thought I would focus today on some of my own practice honed during 24 years. It seems like it might be 100, right? Some of this was overlapping, so I'm not quite as old as I might think. These 24 years of freelance consulting with organizations, mostly nonprofit. But rather than, I'm going to share with you some things that I also want to actually make it actionable, practical. So what I want to do now is just collect some examples of conflict in organizations that you are aware of, you've been a member of, and it doesn't have to be the church, probably better that it isn't, although it'd be interesting if it was. So I'd like to just gather a few possible conflicts.
Well, one thing that I've experienced with one of my oldest friends, Mr. Craig Rickers. Let's hear it up for Craig Rickers. Anyway, is what happens in a musical organization. And there are different ways to cope with what happens. And in any organization, somebody exhibits different forms of leadership. Okay, can you hear me now? All right, so leadership goes with what you're capable of. And as they say, you rise to your level of mediocrity. And some people, like myself, love to drive. I'm a truck driver by profession, and I do various other things. But so getting the band to the kid is a vital thing, and organizing the logistics of getting the band, the equipment, and so on is my favorite thing to do.
Okay.
I love this. Now, Craig's favorite thing is he is an organizational genius when it comes to organizing song lists. Putting songs together that fit in a certain order to make it all work. And so he has always had that responsibility. There are other people that are more visually oriented, that are assigned to work with the lighting people. And so you find your strength and you go with it. Now, when you're creating a musical composition, there are 3 ways it can happen.
Okay, so can I stop you right there and just say, I've already got enough for a whole sermon.
Okay.
So I'm going to, if you don't mind, just pick out one of the early things you mentioned about different gifts of leadership.
Okay.
And how those get used and sometimes are in conflict in an organization.
The ideal is a democracy.
Let's get to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there are dictatorships within that.
Well, yeah, okay, that's good, thank you. What else might we have in terms of organizational conflict?
How are we going to spend the money?
How are we going to spend the money? Oh no, we can't possibly be in conflict about that. That's a very good one, nice and general. This leadership question is great too. Another one, yes, Marcia.
Difference of opinion and things such as among the whole congregation and how we resolve it in terms of what kind of signs and banners that we put out front, how we have our order of service, what content we want in our newsletter, all those kinds of things.
Okay, great. So very nitty-gritty operational conflicts. Good. Maybe a couple more.
Hi.
Yes.
Different cultures. When I taught in the Arctic, the white culture looked down on the Inuit culture as inferior and not being able to contribute and doing things in different ways. Quite often new teachers who came up that happened because they didn't learn English or French until starting in grade 3, but they'd already had kindergarten 1 and 2 in their first language. So it was just a terrible opinion. And then the second biggest problem was allowing everyone to participate at their own pace and not trying to ramrod and do it for you.
Round robin, what?
Ramrod and do everything yourself when you're in a group, letting
Okay.
everybody have a role
Okay,
and participate at their own pace.
okay. Yes.
Egos.
What? I'm sure, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Not around here.
not around here, yeah. Lorraine?
Conflicts over how to make decisions.
Ah, how to make decisions, yes. That's yeah, just, not even what the decision is, it's just how are you gonna make one? That is really, critical, isn't it? Couple more.
Charlene and I worked in women's studies at Georgia State, and one of the most difficult things that I had to struggle with, and I think she did too, was irreconcilable and unchallengeable expectations and goals. One student in particular wanted a safe space, and that meant no criticism of anything she said, which was, you know, very, very difficult to work with.
Yeah. Excellent, I think that's, unless somebody has a burning one, that if you walk out and you're gonna really regret that you didn't add your recipe to the mix.
I was in a journalism organization once where we invited a whole group of very young journalists to come in as guests, and they challenged us on everything, and it was hard to deal with.
Okay. Okay, good. That's a nice brew, isn't it? Okay, good. So I'm going to be pulling from these examples. I may not use them all. Please don't get your feelings hurt if I don't. Or you may choose to get your feelings hurt. They're your feelings. So just do whatever you need to do. So the first technique that I find really invaluable, and it takes some time, and I don't always have the luxury of time in a consulting situation, but in a long-term organizational relationship, like alternate groups where I learned this technique, and maybe the e-church, I like to use story circles. Anybody familiar with what this is? A couple of people. Oh, good, I get to share it with you. So basically, you have a problem or a topic you want to discuss, and you break into small groups. 6 or 8 is a wonderful small group, and you sit in a circle. That's why they call it a story circle. And everybody has a given amount of time, usually short, 3 or 4 minutes, and it's timed. The rules are very simple: no interrupting or crosstalk during the story. You just listen to the story. You go around the circle. You can pass, but you have to contribute eventually. And after the round of stories, there's then time for crosstalk and discussion, hopefully finding new connections or new insights into other points of view. Now, I want to lift up the memory and spirit of John O'Neill, the founder of Free Southern Theater, who came up through SNCC, whose company built the story circle technique. It's now used very, very widely, often in theater situations, but not always. I think you've used it, Patton, in your work. It builds community. It takes time, but truthfully, it is so worth it if you have the time. So a story circle prompt about one of these let's take the leadership. So a good story circle prompt about leadership would be, tell a story when you felt you were an effective leader. Or tell a story when you feel like you missed the boat on a leadership opportunity. So these are personal stories. They're not sermons. They're not opinions. They're stories. They're personal stories. So another one might be, tell a story about a time when you felt people were talking a language you didn't understand. Just tell that story. And you can interpret that prompt any way you want to. But the point is just to build connection and understanding. So that's technique number one. Second tip is to make sure people are using common definitions and really probe assumptions. So the example about safe space, I would probe on, well, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to be in a safe space? And how can we distinguish that from being in a space of learning? Or how can we accommodate? So we just break down the language that people are using, because often we're using the same words in very different ways, right? You all know this. So you just want to break it down, ask people to be more specific about, well, what do you mean by safe? And does that mean something different to other people, or are we talking the same language? So that's a really, really important tip. The third one, which I love, and I learned this from a fabulous visual artist and community labor organizer who lives in Minneapolis, Ricardo Levens Morales. And he has, Google him because he has wonderful artwork for sale. And he taught me years ago that if people are in conflict, that one of the things you can do is to draw the frame larger. So if we're in conflict about safe space, to go back to that, let's draw the frame larger. And the larger frame might be a place of learning and growth, or development and mutual support. You could draw the frame larger on, we're all going to get to the gig in our separate cars. No, we're all going to take the company van. No, we're not going to, whatever. To how can we make this the most enjoyable road trip for everybody? So you just draw the frame a little larger. A great example was in last Sunday's paper. I don't know if you all read the article about Jimmy Carter and the mayor of Plains, Georgia, Ellie Godwin III. Anybody read that? Mayor Godwin is a staunch conservative. He probably disagrees with every damn policy platform that Jimmy Carter ever thought about. But they worked together very productively for over 30 years because they drew the frame larger. They rose above their individual policy or whatever. To the frame was, how can we best serve the people of Plains? And in that frame, they found common ground and could negotiate their differences. So they didn't talk politics. They talked practice within that larger frame. So, and they found it in that common ground that they both so faithfully served for so many years. So what would be the larger frame for, let's take the signs and banners, the order of service, the content of the newsletter. How could you draw a larger frame rather than, fighting over this banner, this content, that content, this order? How could you draw a larger frame around those conversations? Anybody got any ideas?
Well, just like you mentioned in the example of Jimmy Carter, Godwin is a fabulous drummer. And so he participates in the Sunday service as a drummer, as a percussionist. And he's adored by the congregation for his skills, regardless of his politics. And he's a fabulous drummer. He's like my hero drummer. But so his quality was recognized, and so that ego, now balanced with his super ego. And so, and with everybody, the real meaning of peace is balance.
Yeah. So one way we could reframe these conversations is, what is the face? Let's look at putting forward a welcoming face to the visitor. So that would be a larger frame.
I was going to say about the banners in particular, or order of service, the question might be, how do we want First E to appear to people who are not necessarily members?
Mhm.
What kind of public face?
What's our external public face, that frame? Yeah, that's a good way to frame that. Marcia?
Pretty much the same thing, but, you know, what is the message that we want to put out there?
Mhm. So if we can have the conversation in which there is disagreement in the frame of what is the message, putting out a positive, welcoming message, it would be important to actually say what the message is, because you could send out other messages. But is it fair to say that a welcoming, inclusive, open door message is what you would want? So if you use that as your frame, then you can have the conversation in that context. Let me move on. I think that one of the most vital skills, and that I continue to rehearse, is to take a curious stance and encourage other people to do the same. So there's a bumper sticker over my door as I walk out it that says, "Less judgment, more curiosity." Now, curiosity is expressed in neutral questions, not, "Why did you put that ugly banner out front?" That is not a curious question, right? So we want to reframe conflict as not something to be avoided or, you know, be afraid of, but as a catalyst, an opportunity for change. So let's take one of these examples. Let's take it about, let's take the general question about how to make decisions. So what would be some good, neutral, some curious questions if you think you're going to get into a conflict with a group about how you're going to make a decision? What would be some good, curious questions to ask?
What's your experience with consensus?
What's your experience with consensus?
Is there a hierarchy involved in the church or a council?
Is there a hierarchy involved, either implicit or explicit? That's something that you can be curious about. What other curious questions? Edie?
Are there other decision-making dynamics to learn about as a topic?
Are there some other decision-making dynamics that we could learn about? Yeah. What about, let's see what's on our list. Let's take one of them, how are we going to spend the money? What are some curious questions?
How much do we have?
Yeah. What's some other curious, neutral questions?
What are our priorities?
What are our priorities? What are our obligations? Do we have any obligations?
What do we support?
What do we support? What do we stand for?
How much to keep for a rainy day?
Yes. Do we need a rainy day fund? Yes. Should we? Yes. Curious? Yeah. So the other thing that framing curious questions does is puts it, that's a question, which implies that you are seeking and desirous of an answer. So it's not a diatribe, it's not a lecture, it's not a strongly held belief or opinion. It's a serious question that you expect to have a serious answer to, so you can have a serious discussion. But I will say that the art of the neutral question is really difficult. I find it difficult because you have to suspend your own ego and your own points of view and step out of that space of thinking that you might know what is best when you start to ask those questions.
There's a principle my mother taught me called the diamond principle. And when a discussion about a proposal moves from general to specific, if you can't answer who, what, where, when, then go back and think about it. You know, she had a way of cutting
Yeah,
right to the
yeah.
point, and that was the diamond principle, which I try to, because people talk about, we actually should, could, get right to it. What are you going to do?
Well, you know, that goes back to the art of difficult conversations, where their first thing, what their first, you know, rubric was, what happened? Just, you know, so that you really get into like, what are the things that we know for sure about this issue? So I'll move on. So consensus is a time-honored process, and I'm sure most of you know something a little about consensus. And it is time-consuming, but people who really love consensus believe that it's time well spent, because the decisions that you make in the process of consensus are generally going to be stronger and longer lasting than decisions you might make by a single authoritarian leader or by the blunt cudgel of majority voting. So there is some value in learning how to use consensus, but as I said, it takes a little time, and to do it in a large group can be really daunting. So I learned a really quick technique to gauge the temperature or feeling of a room around consensus and quickly identify what the deep conflicts, or what we call the blocking concerns, might be. Now, consensus is often misconstrued to mean that everybody's enthusiastically in favor. That is not the case. Consensus is the lack of a blocking concern. So a blocking concern, we're going to illustrate this, and we're going to use this little technique right now around one of these questions. I'll decide which one in a minute. So it's called fist to five. Anybody familiar with fist to five? Oh, good. So, excellent. It's a technique that Patton and I and Alice have learned, again, through alternate routes. So we're going to pose a question, a proposal. We're going to do a proposal. And then we're going to use fist to five to practice it. So I propose that, no, I better teach you the technique first before I go around proposing anything, right? So I'm going to make a proposal, and if you are wholeheartedly in favor of the proposal, you're going to throw a 5. If you're mostly in favor, you're going to do a 4. If you're sort of, you know, neutral, doesn't matter, you can throw a 3. If you feel a little uncertainty about it, you're going to do a 2. If you are really not in favor of it, but if you have a concern that you absolutely cannot support in any way, shape, or form, you throw the fist. Not throw the fist. So a fist would be what we consider and call a blocking concern. So what we would do is we would take a nice proposal and then do a fist to 5, and then I'll show you how we can use that. Would anybody like to make a proposal about how we spend our money? Yes, Patton.
I would like to propose that we have a lavish party with lots of champagne.
So Patton's proposal is that we have a lavish party with lots of champagne. If you're all in favor of this, throw us a 5, or a 4, 3, 2, 1, or a blocking. Let's hold up your hands and leave them up. Now we're going to look around the room, and we're just going to observe and notice. We see there's quite a lot of support. I see a lot of 5s. We see a lot of 5s. Oh, but we also see several blocking concerns. So what we'll do first is just ask one of the 5 people to tell us why you threw a 5. Why do you think this is a good proposal?
I like the party.
I like the party. That is a good reason. Now I'm going to ask one of the blocking concerns, and I think I saw one right over here, a fist. Did I see
Over there.
And there was one back here. And there was one in the middle. No? So, no. Yeah. Okay, so tell us what your blocking concern is.
Our priority here is not to have lavish parties with champagne.
So you don't think it's a good use of funds?
Correct.
Right. Does that pretty much sum up your fists?
You gotta pay the band.
You gotta pay the payment. Does that sum up your fist?
Also the alcohol aspect.
The alcohol aspect.
You remember
So-
that time?
Interesting. So let's hear from a couple of people who threw up a 1. So you don't have a blocking concern, but you have a lot of discomfort about it.
Yeah, it was the same thing about alcohol, assuming that some people wouldn't be able to enjoy it. So I didn't want to stop everybody from partying if they wanted to, but it might block some people from being comfortable.
Good. I heard somebody else say that too about the alcohol issue. Okay. Good. So we would want to reframe, we would want to restate the proposal, hearing the concerns of people who block it. Patton, you offered the proposal. Would you like to offer a new proposal, or would you like somebody else to do it?
I'll give it a try.
Okay.
We should have a lavish party with some champagne and some juice.
Okay, so.
And pay the band.
And pay the band.
So we're going to have a lavish party with some champagne and some juice, and we're going to pay the band. And again, fist to 5. So if that sounds a great idea to you, and let's see where the blocking concerns are. So we've seen some of the fists disappear. We are got a 2 here and a 5 here. Let's hear the blocking concern from Marcia.
I object to the term lavish. I agree with Bill, it's not the best use of our funds.
Could you reframe the proposal in a way that you feel addresses your concern?
I feel that we could have a fun party where we serve a variety of drinks for the community to come together.
And pay the band.
Excuse me?
And pay the band.
Yeah. Oh.
I beg you not to forget that.
Yes, always pay the band.
No pipe, no music.
So
we charge at the door.
Oh, okay. So we've got a friendly amendment, a fun party with not free, but a fun party with a admission charge, the variety of beverages with paid entertainment.
Sliding scale.
Sliding scale. A sliding scale admission, fun party, variety of drinks, where we have a paid band.
Yeah,
I've been
to that party here.
Yeah. Okay, so that's our new proposal. So fist to 5 on this proposal. Okay, let's hold them up and let's see them. So what I'm going to do before I ask you all to look at each other. So I see a 2 here, and what I want to do as a facilitator is to tease out what makes you not 100% behind this.
I don't like the alcohol part.
Oh, you don't like alcohol at all? Okay. So that would be, okay. But you're not willing to block it, but it's just a state of discomfort.
Yeah.
So that's an important piece of information for you as you make this decision. That there are people who are in favor of a party, but they have mixed feelings about the alcohol. So as the planners plan your party, you want to pay very careful attention to this concern. It's not a blocking concern, but it is a concern that you just want to acknowledge and think of, well, how do we address it? How do we acknowledge it? You don't have to eliminate it. She said it's not blocking. So, yes.
I would like to make a proposal that First E has twice monthly get-togethers.
Whoa.
Parties. One will be non-alcoholic. One will have open drinks. every other Saturday evening, hosted with a variety of music and a sliding scale.
Okay, I'm gonna put that, that's a great proposal.
I'm curious about something.
You are?
Yeah. Is the alcohol objection that people get out of control with drinking, or that you don't want to be around alcohol? Why is the...
Both.
Good.
What if there was a proposal that the alcohol would be one glass of champagne for whoever wanted it, and that was all the alcohol? Does that raise your thing? It doesn't change your...
Okay, so we could hash this out, but we're not going to. But I have to say that you really upped the ante because you threw in a lot of new stuff. Twice a month, variety of entertainment, not just one band, but a variety of entertainment. But we could go on until we got a proposal that people could live with. And we could, make it a dry event on occasion to really accommodate everybody. So anyway, the Fist of Five. Now the key to this is not just what you say, but your observation of how the temperature of the room goes. So it's about noticing how other people are indicating their thing. So we're going to do one more exercise. But before I do, I want to ask you all, I know that you all deal with conflicts in your own organizations. Are there other tips and tools that you like to use?
I was a mentor teacher in the Arctic, and we had all the new teachers in the gym, and we had all the sea lift equipment, so desks and bookshelves. So I broke everybody into 3 groups, the Inuit teachers, the French teachers, and the English teachers, and I had them each put together a bookshelf. Then, after that was completed, I broke up the groups and I put 2 Inuit with 2 English with 2 French in one group and had 3 groups that way, and I had them build something. It took twice as long. And we talked afterwards about why, and we kind of did the storytelling afterwards.
Yeah, so I think that's a great example because it puts that storytelling aspect into a material object. And I think also the really important thing you lifted up that I want to lift up is the debriefing afterwards. So we're going to notice that in just a minute. Let me have Marcia.
Talking stick.
Talking stick.
Using the talking stick so everyone has an opportunity to express, but nobody interrupts.
That's a great technique. Anything else you use to deal with conflict? Okay, so we're going to
And the organization, form some other ones.
Or just, form another organization. Really.
I don't know if it would work with adults, but at school I had them draw things. Draw the feelings out.
It's always good to get people out of their heads and into their bodies.
Use a mediator or use nonviolent communication.
Yeah. So can you just say a little tiny bit more about nonviolent communication?
Well, I think the basic tenet is that you say how you feel. You don't say like, oh, you made me feel angry. When you said that, I felt angry. So it's kind of like your own agency and not blaming other people for how you feel.
Yeah. That's so important for people to use I statements like that. It's like the core thing. So I've gone on a little bit more, but I wanted to introduce you to one more technique that I use a lot, and it's fun. So I'm going to ask you to move as you are able, and we're going to use this space, and we're just going to map. We're going to use it to map. So if you'll join me up here, everybody, as you are able, and if you're not able, stay close so that you can hear. Okay, as quickly as you can.
She's going to tell us in a second.
Okay. So if you grew up in a rural area, stand down there. If you grew up in a huge people who grew up in a small city, join me here. If you grew up maybe in a suburb of a large city or small city, but in a suburb of a large city, come stand over here.
What's a village?
So a village, how was it?
2,500.
I think that's a small city. We'll make it a small city. So small city. Do we have any medium city? Small city. Oh, yeah. Oh, small city. Small city. Small city. Suburbs here. So
What about
okay, I'm going to hold on to that question. Let's figure out. And what was your question, Marsha? Medium city. Why don't you come stand in a small city? Just for right. We're small city.
We are the suburbs.
Okay. There's the suburbs. And you're both.
What about New York?
New York is a big city, that's where you are. All right then. Okay, so I just want, so we've got one person who's going to migrate between the two. So where are you? Small city, big city?
I guess so.
Okay.
Well, you're a small city and what else?
Well, New York City and small
Why
town.
don't you stand right where you are?
Brooklyn, come on.
So so what we've done, this is very simple. We've just sort of mapped the room about where you grew up. So here's the rural people, here's the suburb people, here's the small city people, and here's the big cities. So what do you notice about this? What do you notice?
Lots of small city.
Lots of people from small cities and almost an equal number of people from rural areas. What else do you notice about this?
How curious it makes me in my own mind, I'm real curious about, I wonder how growing up in rural influenced their development.
That is why, gold star. Because this is where this conversation can take us. Is there something about the experience of growing up in a rural area that might influence your decision making here today? Is there something, and notice, nobody said anything, but there's only two people from a big city. They grew up in a big city. We all live in one now, sort of, except when we don't. So, and look at all the suburbs. Not a lot of people from nothing. So what you want to do is take a moment to observe the lay of the land, because it will lead to curious questions. Just like she said, how does this influence the decision making that we might have? Let's do another one real quick. If you take care of children or teenagers at any time during the week, on the weekend or during the day, go down there. If you take care of elderly or, aging, if you take care of someone who's older than you are, come down here. If you only have to take care of yourself and maybe a partner, stay right there, stand right there. So, children or teenagers, aging, elderly parents, yourself, and maybe one other person. And what about you guys? Then go stand over there. So this group is if you have to care for yourself and your partner. And a dog. And a dog. Okay. What do we know?
I object. This is too many people in this group that are different. You have to care for only yourself, like me, with no care, no partner.
Okay, so let's have only yourself over here.
Or animals. Only yourself or animals.
Okay.
No partner, no animals.
Oh, wait a minute.
For the purposes of this conversation, what would make the most sense? What do we want to know about? We want to know about how this might affect your participation. For right now, let's leave it like this, because I think that what we've got, let's see the people who are taking care of aging. So please notice a very important thing. No one in this room is responsible on a daily basis for children or teenagers.
Good for us.
And we our member have a responsibility for an older person. So again, how might that affect the decision that you might make as a congregation?
Well, the first thing that I noticed without having the kids and the teenagers here are people who are caring for them is how are we going to expand our group in years to come if we don't have youth?
Yep. So let's do one more, and actually I'm going to ask you all to suggest one. Thank you. This will be our last one. Do you have a suggestion or something that you're curious about? Yeah.
Who's still working or involved in some organization that takes up a large amount of your time during the week?
Okay, so if you are still fully employed, however you define that, you have to get, if you are still fully employed, come down here. If you are part-time employed, come here in the middle. If you are fully retired and have no obligation to anybody for anything, come down there. Okay.
Working part-time is different from it.
If you have 3 jobs.
Yeah, so these are, the way we're constructing this one is if you don't have an obligation to an organization for work, whether it's part-time, full-time, whatever. And, okay, let's have self-employed people right here. Okay. And then, is anybody, and who's down here with, still have a job? I can go to work every day.
Well, basically, not
Yeah.
You're self-employed, Marcia, aren't you? You're self-employed.
What?
You're self-employed as a massage therapist.
Right.
This is self-employed.
The point really is just to look at your continuum.
Right.
It's just to notice, just to notice, and how might this play into your decision making? Or what's the meaning of this?
To me, the reason I asked was because it reflects how much time you have that's available when we look at, doing projects and things like that. How much energy do we have to draw from?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this will be, I just want to send you back to your seats with just a exhortation, if you will, to embrace conflict, not to manage it or avoid it or do anything with it other than to embrace it and think of it as a catalyst or a crucible for creative change and new possibilities and alternate ways of looking at things. So it's just an evolutionary spark. So thank you very much for your attention. Sorry that took so long.
That's okay.
I know that was a little longer than usual, but I hope you got a little exercise.
Yes, thank you, Kathie.